Alright y'all, so I need everybody to sit all the way down for this one, because what the game just did might be the boldest, messiest, most career-risking move we have seen in hip-hop in a long, long time. The game dropped the documentary 3 this past Friday at midnight, 24 tracks, and on the surface it is supposed to be a legacy celebration. But baby, when you actually sit with what is being said on this album, it is not a party. It is a message, and that message is addressed to one man and one man only. Kendrick Lamar. Yes, that Kendrick Lamar. The boogeyman. The Pulitzer winner. The Super Bowl headliner. And I already know what y'all been asking in my mentions since Friday. B, is this a diss album, or is this a party album? And honey, I listened to all 24 tracks front to back, twice, and I am here to tell you it is both. And that is exactly what makes it so dangerous. So today we are getting all the way into it. Why the game is coming at Kendrick Lamar, why Kendrick Lamar has not said one single word back, and why the entire city of Compton is holding its breath right now. Y'all know how we do it over here. Tea first, opinions after. Let's get into it. Now, for anybody who has been living under a rock, let me set the table real quick. Kendrick Lamar, in the year 2026, is untouchable. And I do not mean regular famous untouchable. I mean the kind of untouchable that maybe 3 or 4 rappers in the entire history of this genre have ever been. Kendrick Lamar owns the biggest song of the modern era. Kendrick Lamar owns the Super Bowl stage. Kendrick Lamar owns the Grammy count, the streaming charts, the cultural conversation, and even the silence in between albums. You could walk into a room full of rappers right now and ask who the greatest is, and the answers would land on Kendrick Lamar before you even finish the question. Legends give him his flowers. Peers hand him the crown. The newcomers pledge their loyalty. That is where we are. And here is the part that makes this story so crazy. One of the very men who stood on that stage back in 2011, one of the very men who helped pass Kendrick Lamar the torch on that legendary West Coast night, has been quietly loading up for over a decade. And his name is The Game. Now y'all know I do not deal in rumors over here. So let me be clear about what this is. This is not a stretch. This is not a clickbait shell with nothing inside. This is a paper trail. This is the longest Cold War in modern West Coast rap, and the pressure finally had nowhere left to go. So let's trace how we even got here, because baby, this story does not start with an album. It starts at a youth center in Compton. Before Kendrick Lamar was Kendrick Lamar, before the Pulitzer, before the PG Lang empire, before any of it, he was just a charismatic teenager at a youth center in his home city. And in one of the strangest twists of hip-hop fate, one of the older brothers who used to walk through that same building as part of a probationary community program was a young Jason Taylor, the man the whole world would come to know as The Game. And that is not internet folklore, y'all. That is documented history. The Game has told that story on camera himself, remembering how Kendrick was always focused, always burning with something the whole room could feel. Now fast forward a few years, and their paths crossed again. By 2006, Kendrick, who was still going by K. back then, was showing up on The Game's mixtapes. The Cypher Off Black Wall Street Journal Volume 1. Cali Dreams Off You Know What It Is Volume 4. Kendrick was hungry and proven, but he was not yet the man the coast would eventually crown. The Game, on the other hand, was in the middle of the biggest commercial run of his life. Fresh off the documentary and Doctor's Advocate. Still riding that Aftermath cosign. Still positioned as Dr. Dre's most viable signee. And to The Game's credit, he did what OGs are supposed to do. He put Kendrick on tours. He let him open shows. He introduced him to the machine. When Section .80 dropped, and later Good Kid, Mad City, The Game was one of the very first names publicly telling the industry that this boy was about to run the entire coast. And anybody who tries to erase that from the record is lying to you. The Game gave Kendrick Lamar real early shine. That part is true. But y'all, here is where the math stops being clean. Because according to The Game himself, there is a version of history where Kendrick Lamar was supposed to be his signing. The Game claims that back in the mid-2000s he used to be around Top Dog's house, giving advice on how to move J-Rock and the rest of the roster. And he says he told Top more than once that he wanted Kendrick under his own imprint. He wanted the credit for discovering him. Now, TD's inner circle has publicly waved that version of events off. Their own security called it fiction on Instagram. So before Kendrick Lamar ever released a debut album, there was already a crack forming between what The Game remembers and what TD confirms. And y'all, some fans have been sounding off about this all weekend. One fan said, Game been telling that same story for 15 years and it gets bigger every time he tells it. Another fan said, I believe Game. Why would he lie about wanting to sign Kendrick? And a third fan said, it does not matter who found him. Kendrick was always going to be Kendrick. Y'all drop down in the comments and tell me whose version you believe, because this little crack right here, this is where the whole earthquake starts. Now, for a while, Everything still looked good on the outside. By the time Good Kid had bloomed into To Pimp a Butterfly, the two of them were still linking up in the booth. The city. See no evil. On me off the documentary too. Their names were still being said in the same sentence. Their handshake still looked real. From the outside, it looked like a Compton alliance stitched together by loyalty. On the inside, y'all, it was already coming apart. And then came June of 2015, and everything the game and Kendrick Lamar had built together quietly walked off a cliff. The song was 100. The album was the documentary too. The feature was Drake. And the bar that changed everything. The bar that nobody stopped to argue about at the time, but everybody has replayed 1,000 times since, was Drake saying he could have all of Kendrick's fans if he just stayed on some more conscious material. It was subliminal. It was surgical. And it lived on a song hosted by the game. That was strike one. But strike two is the part that really mattered. And it is the part Kendrick Lamar apparently never forgave. The game shot the music video for 100 in the actual streets of Compton, blocks from Kendrick Lamar's real home, with Drake, the Toronto rapper who had just taken a shot at him, performing those exact bars in Kendrick's own zip code. Y'all, that is salt in an open wound. That is a Toronto flag planted 3 blocks from Kendrick's mother's house. That is the moment the big brother from the youth center chose the outsider over the little homie. And the little homie noticed. Now, to be fair, because y'all know I try to be fair over here, the game has always claimed he did not read it that way. He has said he did not think Drake was actually dissing Kendrick on that record. He has said if he had known Kendrick felt disrespected, he would have handled it differently. And some of that might even be true. But the math is not subtle. Rap etiquette has one unshakable law. You do not bring another man's rival into that man's territory to talk noise. Once you break that law, forgiveness becomes something the other side gets to choose. And Kendrick Lamar chose silence. Now this next part is important, so lean in. Kendrick did not go public with any of this. He did not write a diss. He did not post about it. He did not vent on a podcast. He simply removed the game from the list of people whose calls get answered. And in Kendrick Lamar's world, y'all, that is worse than any diss he could have written. Because being removed from the list means you no longer exist inside the calculation. The phone stopped ringing. The calls stopped getting returned. And the game has spent 10 years calling a number that Kendrick made unreachable. Now, some fans feel for him here. One fan wrote, "I would be hurt too. That man put Kendrick on and got ghosted." But another fan clapped back and said, "Kendrick don't owe nobody a friendship. He barely talks to his own label mates." Tell me in the comments, y'all. If somebody brought your rival to your mama's block and rolled cameras, are you ever picking up their call again? Be honest. Now spin the clock a full 10 years forward, because every fault line on the West Coast is about to rip wide open. Kendrick and Drake go to war. Not subliminals. Not shadows. Total war. Push-ups. Euphoria. 616 in LA, Family Matters. Meet the Grahams. Not like us. The entire genre got dragged into that fight. And when the dust cleared in 2024, Kendrick Lamar had done something no rapper had ever done to Drake. He beat him on the charts, on the culture, on the streets, and on the Super Bowl stage. Then he capped it with GNX, an album that walked into the 2026 Grammys and came back holding trophies. And in the middle of that entire massacre, y'all, one very loud, very West Coast voice was standing on the wrong side of the room. That voice belonged to the game. He posted Drake's energy on his Instagram story at the height of the feud. He was seen dancing with the OVO camp in public. He told cameras he loved Drake, that Drake was his friend, that the West Coast could not force him to choose. And without ever saying Kendrick's name, he chose. He chose the outsider one more time, in the exact same language he used in 2015. And y'all, this time Kendrick Lamar did not have to notice quietly, because the entire coast noticed for him. When Kendrick threw the pop-out concert in Inglewood, the one that felt like a Super Bowl before the Super Bowl, the one where every West Coast legend from Snoop to YG to Dr. Dre stood on that stage as living confirmation of the coronation, the game was not there. Not on stage. Not in the crowd. Not backstage. Not in the pictures. The one Compton rapper old enough and famous enough to have been at the very first crowning back in 2011 sat the second one out. Now his people have insisted he was not invited and that he would not have declined if he had been. But baby, say that answer out loud, and it only proves the point. Everybody else got an invite. He did not. He got painted out of the story. And one fan said it perfectly under a clip of the pop-out. Game watching that stage from home is the saddest thing I ever seen. That's his city. Another fan said, "Y'all forgetting Game was at the 2011 crowning crying with joy for Kendrick. This is heartbreaking." And look, one thing I will say about the Game is that whatever else he is, the man loves Compton. So imagine watching your city crown somebody else and not even getting a seat in the building. That kind of hurt does not stay quiet forever. And it did not. Because when the game finally decided to open his mouth about it, he did not do it on wax first. He did it in a comment section. Of all places. When Poetic Flacco dropped a video calling Kendrick Lamar ungrateful, arguing that Kendrick cashed the cosigns when he needed them, and then coldly ghosted the man who gave them, the game saw it. And the game replied, at least one dude got it. Fans and internet goofies will never get it. These dudes aren't who you think they are. One day I'm going to pull the curtain down so you can see every clown in this circus. Y'all, read that again slowly. Those are not the words of a peaceful veteran watching from the sidelines. Those are the words of a man loading a weapon. And that was not the only warning shot. There was the Versus stage, where he stopped mid-song during his rendition of 100 to shout out Drake and tell the whole Los Angeles crowd he did not care how anybody in the building felt about it. There was the Gangsta Grillz verse where he floated the line, if I ain't the best rapper from Compton, it's got to be Kendrick. And if Kendrick's the best, tell him step up and end it. Every one of those moments was a flare sent up over Compton, waiting to see if Kendrick Lamar would look up. Kendrick did not look up. And y'all, when a proud man's warning flare gets ignored, the next thing that comes out of his weapon is not a warning. It is a payload. And the payload dropped this past Friday, August 21st, at midnight, disguised as a triple-disc legacy record. Now sit with the timing of that for a second, because the timing is a strategy. The documentary 3 is not a birthday week release. It is not a tour cycle drop. It is a mid-August ambush landed in the exact stretch of the calendar when the industry historically pays no attention to legacy artists. The game did not want a review window. He wanted a bomb window. Drop on a Friday, force every hip-hop show to cover it inside 48 hours, and make it impossible for Kendrick Lamar's team to plan a slow response. That was the play. The problem with that play is that Kendrick Lamar's team does not respond on anybody else's calendar. They respond when the receipts have been counted, the lawyers have been briefed, and the master is already mixed. So the game did not shorten Kendrick's timeline. He accelerated it. Now let's get into these tracks, because this is where the tea gets scalding. Track 8 is called LA Monster. And the chorus opens with the line, I ain't got no problem with the boogeyman, and he ain't got a problem with me, 'cause I'm the LA Monster. Y'all, that is not accidental phrasing. That is a direct answer to Kendrick Lamar calling himself the certified boogeyman on Not Like Us. The game is not just responding to the nickname. He is refusing it. He is telling Kendrick, in language every hip-hop fan can decode in one listen, that the boogeyman does not scare him because he is the older, bigger shadow walking the same city. And then he doubles down with a swipe that the whole internet read as a shot at Kendrick's GNX victory lap, basically calling the celebration corny in the same city that gave Kendrick that album. Now, fans are split right down the middle on this one. One fan said, LA Monster is hard. Game is the only one with the courage to say what everybody whispering. Another fan said, this is embarrassing. Kendrick gave him nothing but grace, and this is the thanks. And a third fan said, if Kendrick respond to this, it's over. Game better enjoy this weekend. And I need y'all to tell me in the comments, is LA Monster courage or is it a confession? Then comes track 11, and baby, track 11 is where my mouth fell open. The song is called No Breaks, and No Breaks has a hook. A Drake hook. Just the hook. No verse. No bars. Nothing anybody could sue over. Just Drake's voice, floating on the chorus of a Compton-branded album, at the exact moment the West Coast is still swimming in the aftermath of the Drake and Kendrick war. And on his own verse, the game raps, me, Drake, and a Draco, we the three amigos, said pick a side. Then I'm picking homicide. That is not subtle. That is not deniable. That is the game telling every Kendrick Lamar fan in Los Angeles that he has made his choice. And his choice is not the boy who got crowned in his own city. His choice is the man from the other side of the border. And more than that, his choice is to plant Drake's voice, literally, on a Compton album, in the exact place Kendrick Lamar has spent his whole career saying Toronto voices do not belong. That is not a musical decision, y'all. That is a territorial statement. That is a flag planted on the block. One fan summed it up and said, Drake on a documentary album in 2026 is crazy work. Game knows exactly what he doing. And honestly, I have to agree. And then comes track 16, The Pen, and this is where the game pulls the oldest trick in the rap beef manual. The innocent face line. He raps, they saying I'm beefing with Kendrick. How the hell do that sound? 'Cause I'm feeling like 50 when he made Back Down. Read that twice, y'all. In the same breath that the game claims not to be beefing with Kendrick Lamar, he casts himself as 50 Cent, and he casts Kendrick as Ja Rule. And everybody who lived through that era knows how it ended. Ja Rule never recovered the radio. Ja Rule never recovered the cool. Ja Rule never recovered the throne. So that line is not a denial. That is a threat wearing a smile. That is the game telling Kendrick Lamar he is prepared to attempt the same kind of erasure, even if most people doubt he has the ammunition to complete it. So the album is not a diss album. And also, the album is a diss album. And that contradiction, that little plausible deniability shell wrapped around what is clearly a coordinated attack, is exactly why the documentary 3 is such a dangerous document. The game knows the modern rules. He knows what Drake's team is being sued over. He knows Not Like Us is sitting at the center of a defamation lawsuit that could reshape how beef records get treated in court forever. He is not handing Kendrick Lamar a lawsuit-shaped invitation. He is trying to deliver the same emotional damage with better lawyers. And here is the part the West Coast is not saying out loud yet. The game knows exactly what Kendrick Lamar's silence is worth. He knows Kendrick did not respond to Rick Ross, did not respond to Lil Wayne's subs, did not respond to the whole OVO camp until Drake left him no room to breathe. Kendrick's silence is a fortress, and the game is not trying to knock the fortress down with a battering ram. He is trying to leave 100 small cuts on the walls until Kendrick has to come out. That is the strategy. And y'all, the interviews are already stacked with the tells. Stat Quo, on Chuck Dizzle's podcast, admitted that the game once believed Kendrick had subliminally dissed him on Not Like Us itself. The opening line about seeing dead people. Stat Quo said he spent over an hour on the phone convincing the game it was not aimed at him. An hour. That is not the phone call of a friend, y'all. That is the phone call of a man who has spent 10 years scanning every Kendrick Lamar lyric for a bullet with his name on it. And when you are that suspicious of your former little brother, the friendship is already dead. Only the funeral is left. And in Compton, the funeral has always been televised. Now, the TD side has been colder about all of this. Punch, the president of TD, publicly corrected the record and reminded everybody that Kendrick did not stop talking to the game out of nowhere. He stopped talking to him after the 100 video. One strike. That is how Kendrick Lamar operates. That is how the whole TD machine operates. And that right there is the part of the story the game has apparently never been able to swallow. He got fired from the friendship in 2015 and nobody told him. He has spent a decade dialing a number that does not ring. And every year that phone stayed silent, the wound got more infected. And then Baby Keem, of all people, hopped on stream and mocked the whole situation. Keem said the game showed up to the 2011 crowning ceremony, crying with the OGs. And then Keem impersonated the game asking Kendrick to acknowledge him, dragging out the word blood in a taunting little voice. Others piled on after that. And y'all, that is not random. That is a coordinated erasure. That is the same treatment TD gave Drake in the weeks before the kill shot landed. It is the sign that Kendrick Lamar's side has already decided who is on the list and who is off it. And the game is off the list. Now compound all of that with what the game has said about his own place on the coast. In his own words, he watches other West Coast icons get their flowers while he gets left off the murals. And y'all, that word murals is not accidental. In Los Angeles hip-hop culture, being painted onto a wall means the city has decided you are permanent. The game feels painted out of the story. He watches the Nipsey memorials go up, the Snoop celebrations, the Dre monuments, the Kendrick Lamar victory lap billboards. And he watches every single one of those walls in before it gets to him. That is the resentment engine. That is the ache that turned into LA Monster. Because when a man is convinced his city is erasing him, the only response he can find in his own head is to write himself back onto the wall in the loudest ink possible. And the loudest ink the game has ever had access to is Kendrick Lamar's name. Whack 100 said on his own show that the game absolutely still loves Kendrick, and that the whole thing could be resolved with one honest conversation. Stat Quo has said the same. But even they concede what everybody watching can see. The game feels owed. Kendrick Lamar feels no debt. And there is nothing on this planet more explosive than a Compton veteran who feels owed something by the biggest rapper his city ever produced. That gap between the ledger the game is reading and the ledger Kendrick keeps in his head, that is the entire fuel source of this feud. And nothing on the documentary 3 closes that gap. Every track widens it. Now, for anybody who is new to the game story, I need you to understand something about this man before we go any further. Conflict is not a detour in his career. Conflict is the highway. This is the same man who fell out with 50 Cent and G-Unit at the absolute peak of his commercial power, when leaving that crew was supposed to be career suicide, and he survived it on the strength of sheer stubbornness. This is the same man who dropped 300 bars when everybody told him a 15-minute diss record was unlistenable, and people still quote it 2 decades later. This is the same man who has feuded with rappers, producers, reality stars, and at one point basically the entire tri-state area, and has never once in 20 years chosen the quiet road when the loud road was available. I am not saying that to clown him, y'all. I am saying it so you understand the wiring. The game's entire legend is built on the idea that he does not blink. Every comeback he has ever had came from swinging when people counted him out. So when you ask why a 46-year-old veteran with a legacy album would risk it all poking at the most dangerous pen alive, you have to remember that in the game's mind, this is not a risk. This is the formula. This is the exact move that made him the game in the first place. And fans who have ridden with him since 2005 see it that way too. One fan wrote, "Game been counted out 10 times, and he's still here. Don't count him out now." But another fan answered that one directly and said, 50 Cent was not Kendrick Lamar. This is a different animal. Somebody needs to get Game's phone. And that right there is the whole debate in 2 sentences. Is this 2005 Game? Or is this a veteran walking into a buzzsaw he talked himself into? And one more thing about the fan response this weekend, because it tells you everything about where the culture is standing. The documentary 3 is actually getting spins. It is not getting laughed out of the room. The production is being praised. The YG and Larry June features are getting love, and more than a few people are saying it is his most focused project in years. So the game did not just make noise, he made a listenable record, and that matters, because it means this story has legs no matter what Kendrick Lamar does next. If the album was trash, Kendrick could ignore it and let it die. But a good album with a diss buried inside it forces the question every single day it stays on the charts. Every stream is another day the boogeyman has to walk past a poster of the man shooting at him. And I genuinely believe that was part of the design. The game did not need the documentary 3 to outsell Kendrick. He needed it to be good enough that it could not be dismissed. Mission accomplished on that front, which means the ball is fully, completely, unavoidably in Kendrick Lamar's court, and the whole world is standing around the baseline watching him hold it. So what is the game supposed to do with all of this? 2 paths, y'all. Path 1, get in the booth and swing for real. Name first. All caps. The way Pusha did Drake in 2018. The way Kendrick Lamar did Drake in 2024. Path 2, stand down. Let the documentary 3 be remembered as a party record with an unresolved shadow. Now, the game's own bodyguard has told the world he is in the studio right now. And the game's own catalog has told the world he does not know how to stand down. That is the corner he has painted himself into. That is the ledge he built. And ledges built by proud men are almost never walked back from. They get jumped from. And that is the tragedy of this exact moment. And y'all, I have seen a lot of you asking whether the game is really willing to go that far. And my honest answer, after covering this man for years, is yes. He is. This is the same artist who said in interviews that he feels his contributions to West Coast rap get skipped over in every Hall of Fame conversation, every top 5 list, every Compton Mount Rushmore debate that ends with Kendrick, Dre, Cube, and Nipsey. Imagine pouring 20 years into a city and watching the city's Mount Rushmore conversation happen like you were never there. Now imagine the one man who could validate your whole legacy with a single feature, a single post, a single name drop on a platinum album, has chosen for 10 straight years to pretend you do not exist. That is not a beef anymore. That is an obsession. And obsessions do not negotiate. Because the last man who charged this hill, the last man who actually went bar for bar with Kendrick Lamar, is still in litigation over it. Still watching his own label distance itself from him in court filings. Still explaining to his fans why the biggest song of his rival's career is named after him. If the game swings and misses, there is no second act. There is no rebranding tour. There is no legacy statue. There is only the documentary 3 becoming a punchline instead of a paper trail. But if the game swings and lands, even once, even one clean bar, the entire West Coast conversation ruptures overnight. That is the calculation that man is running right now. In a studio somewhere in Los Angeles, at 46 years old. With a daughter, he says he wants to stay alive long enough to walk down the aisle. And a legacy, he says, is the only thing left to fight for. And what has Kendrick Lamar said through all of this? Not one word, y'all. Not one. No tweet. No post. No podcast. No stray bar on a Baby Keem Lucy. Nothing. The album dropped Friday. It is now 4 days later. And in a rap news cycle, 4 days is a lifetime. In 4 days, Drake would have posted 3 memes and an AI voice clone. In 4 days, 50 Cent would have made 10 Instagram posts and started a beef with a talk show host. In 4 days, Kanye would have written a manifesto and deleted it. Kendrick Lamar has said absolutely nothing. And in Kendrick's language, silence is not neutrality. Silence is a countdown clock. He is doing exactly what he did to Drake for 6 months before Euphoria landed like a bomb. He is letting the pressure build inside the other man's chest until the other man cannot breathe. That is the boogeyman method. And it is working on the game right now whether the game admits it or not. Kendrick Lamar does not need to move today. He needs to move on the exact day the news cycle stops expecting him to. And one more name I have to mention before we move on, Because y'all keep bringing him up in my comments, and that is Snoop Dogg. Snoop has not said a single word about this album publicly. Not a post, not a repost, not a congratulations. And Snoop congratulates everybody, y'all. Snoop congratulates people on albums he is not even on. So Snoop being on the documentary 3 and still keeping his page quiet tells you the veterans of the city have already chosen their posture, and the posture is duck. Nobody with a legacy to protect wants to be standing next to the game's window when Kendrick Lamar finally looks up. Watch how quiet that whole guest list stays. That silence from the features is louder than anything on the track list. Now the panel circuit has already picked a side, and the side is not the game's side. Rob Markman broke down the 2015 Compton etiquette violation in painful detail. Poetic Flacco has been the loudest voice arguing that the game is a jilted mentor, not a wronged elder. But even Flacco admitted Kendrick could have handled the fade better. Academics has flipped camps depending on the news cycle, as he does. And Complex, Rolling Stone, Hot New Hip Hop, and Hot 97 have all run pieces confirming that yes, the LA Monster line is aimed at Kendrick Lamar. Yes, the No Breaks Drake feature is a flag plant. Yes, the verse on the pen is a threat wrapped in a compliment. There is only one voice missing from the entire discourse, Kendrick's. And every close observer of Compton knows that means the story is not over. Kendrick Lamar has never lost a rap beef in his life. He has never been out-rapped, out-strategized, out-timed, or out-marketed in a war he actually chose to fight. And when he moves for the throat. And here is the part nobody in the game's camp wants to say out loud, but everybody around the couch already knows. The game has already lost the framing war. Even the friendly interviewers are being forced to concede that the 100 shoot was disrespectful. Even the Compton loyalists are being forced to admit the LA Monster line is a Kendrick shot. Even Drake, y'all, Drake of all people, the man whose hook is buried on No Breaks, is not outside talking about this album. Drake is quiet. Because Drake knows what happens next. Drake watched the last 3 men who dared Kendrick Lamar to speak lose everything they were building. Drake is one of those men, and he is still bleeding from that decision 2 full years later. Drake knowing when to shut up is proof that everybody in the room understands what the game apparently still refuses to accept. And one more detail the panel circuit will not say out loud yet. The game did not just plant Drake on this album. He planted Snoop. He planted Ye. He planted Wayne. He planted the exact names that would give any Kendrick Lamar response a blast radius wider than a single target disc can survive. If Kendrick answers LA Monster, does he also have to answer the Snoop feature? The Ye feature? Does he risk drawing collateral fire onto legends who would rather stay neutral? Y'all, the game did not just write a diss album. He wrote a hostage album. Every legend on that track list is a shield. And that is the coldest, most Compton veteran move on the entire record. That is the move of a man who studied every Kendrick Lamar campaign and quietly took notes on how to build a bunker before the drone hits. So the real question, the question that is going to define hip-hop for the rest of 2026, is not whether the game hates Kendrick Lamar. He does. That has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt at this point. The real question is whether the game can survive Kendrick Lamar's silence, and if not, whether he can survive Kendrick Lamar's response when it finally lands. Because it is going to land. Kendrick does not open his fist until the other man has already thrown everything he has. And y'all, the game just threw everything he has. 24 tracks. A Drake hook. A GNX swipe. A boogeyman rebuttal. A Three Amigos declaration. A Ja Rule comparison. A 10-year grievance dressed up as a legacy record. There is nothing left in the clip. He emptied the whole magazine on the intro. And when a man empties the magazine on the intro, whatever he brings to the second verse is getting fired from an empty chamber. Kendrick Lamar has not thrown anything yet. That is the part that should be keeping the game up at night. That is the part every Compton veteran who ever survived a Kendrick beef has warned him about in private conversations he did not listen to. A silent man in a studio is more dangerous than a loud man on a red carpet. And the internet is going to learn that on Kendrick Lamar's schedule, not the game's. Now, here is the thought I want y'all to sit with as we close this out. This story started at a youth center in Compton, with an older man from a probationary program watching a charismatic teenager and thinking he might be somebody one day. And that story has now completed the entire arc of a hip-hop tragedy. The mentor gave the stage. The little brother grew. The little brother surpassed the mentor. The mentor could not accept it. The mentor picked a side. The little brother went quiet. The mentor read the silence as disrespect. The mentor loaded an album. And the little brother is still quiet. The documentary 3 is not a diss album, and the documentary 3 is a diss album. The game is not beefing with Kendrick Lamar, and the game is beefing with Kendrick Lamar. Every contradiction inside this album is a confession. Every contradiction is the sound of a man who cannot decide whether he wants his friend back or his throne back. And Kendrick Lamar already made his decision. He made it in 2015. He made it when the phone stopped ringing. He made it when the pop-out invite never got sent. He made it when GNX went platinum, and he still never said the game's name. So now I need to hear from y'all, because this one is heavy. Tell me in the comments right now. Is the game about to become the second man Kendrick Lamar ends on wax? Or is he about to become the first man to survive Kendrick Lamar's silence long enough for the world to forget the argument ever happened? Is the documentary 3 the beginning of the war? Or is it the whole war fought on one album because the other side refuses to show up? And be honest with me, was the game right to say what he said? Or did he just carve his own tombstone in the language of a city that forgot to paint him on the wall? Drop your verdict below. Drop your favorite line off the album below. Drop the exact bar you think would finally make Kendrick Lamar pick up the pen. And if you missed my deep dive on every rapper who ever tested Kendrick and what happened to them, from Big Sean all the way to Drake, that video is floating on your screen right now. Because before the documentary 3 becomes the documentary 4, you need to know what a Kendrick Lamar reply actually looks like when it lands. The game has spoken. The game has swung. The next voice you hear on this timeline decides everything. And when it comes, it will not be a rumor. It will not be a warning. It will be a verdict. And y'all know Compton has always ended its arguments in verdicts. This one is coming too. I'ma get up out of here, but y'all already know I will be back the second this story moves. Talk to me in the comments, and I will talk to you soon.